I could figure out a way to do this simultaneously. Everything can happen at once. Maybe that's why I need the engineer. When we make a lot of money, we'll actually have a separate person running a board, All right. Enough of that babble from me here beforehand. All right. Welcome everyone to Accuracy in America. I'm Don Irvine, and I'm joined once again by Brian McNicoll.
Good morning. Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, dog faces, and dog-faced pony soldiers.
All right. So we'll start off with the important financial information of the day. It is tax day, the delayed tax day.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I think most of us were hopefully getting a refund and have taken care of our taxes long ago. Those that owe taxes have to pay up tonight by midnight, or at least mail it in, have it postmarked by midnight. And there are those that probably, are going to be doing that, though. It's not the same. I mean, I remember the old stories, and you could watch television on April 15th in the old days and watch the local news stations be down by the old post office in Washington, D.C., where they were just standing there and they were collecting the returns people were getting in there.
And
right?
Merrifield here in Northern Virginia.
That's right. It's a big one. Merrifield's a huge one.
Yeah.
Right. So they're doing that. But a lot of people now, they file electronically, either using a program like TurboTax or what is that other one? Tax
Right. You know what? I'll tell you what. I didn't see any news about it till today. Today I saw a couple people say, "Hey, it's tax day," But I didn't really, before April 15th, you see a lot of coverage. You see people talking about what they're doing to get ready for tax day and so forth, right? So, I bet it slipped up on some people. I bet there's some people who went, wow, okay.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, I would not doubt if the people who thought they got that 3-month reprieve from April to July, it's July. It's like, who's thinking about paying their taxes in July unless
That's right. You never have before.
Right.
You've never had a July tax date before
of
any state, local, anything, right?
Well, the only thing you get, I think, is maybe the estimated taxes are due every quarter. So this might have been it. I don't follow those things because I don't do the estimated route. But in general, yeah. So, there are going to be some people, and this was done because of coronavirus, COVID-19, all the things that are going on there. But, the Wall Street Journal did say the other day that, you have to file, you have to pay taxes. You can't file for an extension, but you still have to pay your taxes because the clock starts ticking, at 12:01 on any unpaid taxes. And you can get a penalty for failure to file. If you were supposed to file and didn't file at all, there is a penalty for that as well. So, there's a lot of things going on here. We'll have to wait and see, exactly what happens, but there probably are people scrambling around and everything like this. Now, I want to say there was an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal, which kind of blew my mind. I have been doing my taxes using TurboTax for, I don't know how many years, but for a long time now. And I can't imagine not using a filing program to do my taxes. But they had a feature story about people who eschew those things, and they love the paper. They love the challenge of filing all the paper and all the forms, and they get thrills when the IRS releases new forms. I'm like, what? They get out the old calculator and stuff like this. I'm like, I don't know. I was like, things are just, the way the taxes are, they're just far too complicated with all the different things you can do. Just go, step by step or whatever, go to the sections you need to fill out and do it. And then, when it tells you what you need to pay or what your free refund is, file it, Yep.
And the other thing is, this has got to be a low point of cash on hand for the federal government, right? Because you waited 3 extra months, didn't really publicize that there's, the new deadline is here. And, they spent, what we spent $7 trillion. We've already spent about $2 trillion more than we spent last year.
Yeah, no, I mean,
early July.
Right, the deficit is huge. Normally the IRS is raking in the cash in April, so that helps. But that has now been postponed till now. The other part of that problem is that I don't think the IRS really knows how much more money they're going to take in because of businesses payroll taxes, all the things that happen that affect people that are filing that, their situations have changed, other things that are going on here. They're not going to take in the kind of money they would have even taken in April. Things, coronavirus, COVID-19 has radically altered our tax structure too, in that sense.
Yeah,
so
with a dramatic increase in spending. Now, a lot of people are hitting that and say, well, we're conservatives. Look at these conservatives signing off on $1 trillion spending packages ad infinitum, right? But if you're conservative, I mean, this is what we conserve for. This is why we don't want to pay for trans library hour and stuff like that, is because when things like this happen and the federal government basically has to take us all to raise for a few months, we can do it. We have the flexibility to do it. We have the economic power to do it. And that didn't, that won't happen. You lose that capability if you're spending that, if you're wasting that money.
Right.
This is what, like, what are you conservatives saving for? This right here, a total calamity that's nobody's fault, that we have to help people out of. And, say what you want about like the PPP and the other one for freelancers and so forth. And, I know there's a lot of criticism of like Ruby Tuesday got a bunch of money, and big private schools, the Catholic Church, some Catholic dioceses have gotten a lot of money, but they are keeping people employed. The Catholic Church owns a lot of property, and the church in Rome, between that and owning one of the biggest construction companies in the world, it has its wealth is fine, financially. But the local dioceses and parishes, you're paying your own freight. You have, a bunch of employees who do not get rich at all working for you, and you're trying to keep them on board and keep the churches operating. So, it's not something we normally do, but it's not establishing religion. It does not threaten the First Amendment in any way. And if the idea of the program is to save jobs, then it shouldn't really matter what your job is.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the PPP could have been run better, but you're talking about a massive program that was thrown together very rapidly.
Like a week.
Right, you have to work with the banks. There's lots of different things going on here. Yeah, were there issues with some of these companies that got money that maybe they could have set that aside for some smaller companies? Yeah, but in the long run, the thing is that the real question is that or the thing is, if they're saving jobs, if they're preserving jobs and doing that, that's good. The threshold, I think they found out pretty fast, was too high. Business owners said, we can't meet this 75% threshold. We need money to operate on top of the payroll. And you've even kind of tied our hands where we can't really have money to help pay the rent. If we can't help pay the rent, we can't pay the employees anyway. We're not going to have a place for them to do. So lots of different things going on here, but overall, I think in some ways, all of this kind of transcended politics. We have to all get on the same page and say, this is about America. This is about our jobs, our economy, and everything like this. And we will do what we need to do to save this. Conservative, liberals, whatever, we can get together on this issue, because, shutting down America and not doing anything, that was not going to be the solution that worked.
Right. And if you're a waitress, whether you're a waitress at Ruby Tuesday or a waitress at Joe's Country Diner, you're still a waitress trying to hang on for dear life while there's no one even allowed to eat in your restaurant, Right. So, that Ruby Tuesday ended up with some of that money doesn't really bother me because, there's no reason to give it all to Joe's Diner.
Well, look,
you've got to save jobs. It's whoever's there,
Yeah, look, I mean, I have been, kind of thinking about pushing the people at AIM based on what I've seen in some of the reports. I mean, Americans for Tax Reform got some money for their research arm and things like that. AIM is a very small organization with a payroll. Why not? I mean, what would be the harm in applying for a loan to help, smooth over the payroll for a little bit that helps them, when they're still struggling to raise money, that type of thing. Why not? I mean, if everybody else is doing it, you don't stand out there and say, well, just, I'm not going to do this on principle. In the meantime, you go down the drain.
Right, and you let your employees go down the drain.
Right, they go down the drain. So it's like, well, that wasn't going to do any good at all. All right, So big first real topic though are the primaries yesterday, because we had Jeff Sessions, who clocked. Yeah, he ran against
Tommy Tuberville could run up scores like that on the football field, he'd still be coaching.
Right.
How come it's in politics?
How come it's Tuberville and not Tuberville?
I just want to know.
But yeah, here's something. I mean, that was an amazing thing. I mean, what was it, like 60-40 or 61-39?
63-37.
Oh, that's what it came out to be. Okay, so that got grooving more so. That's amazing. That race was like that. I think Tuberville. Yeah, I mean, I think he stands a pretty good chance. Jones hasn't really done anything, since he's held the seat. So that's one the Republicans can get, because they're going to need it to backfill against the things they're going to lose. It's
going to be an interesting general, because Doug Jones is an Alabama guy. He's Crimson Tide, right? And of course, Tuberville's Auburn. So I mean, it's going to be a lot of trying to get Alabama people to vote for an Auburn coach. You laugh, but I mean that's not easy down there. Football's pretty serious.
So does that mean is Nick Saban staying out of this one or something then?
Nice.
But they had that, and then you had the Texas congressional runoff, where Trump's physician, former Ronnie Jackson, ran away with his too. I didn't even know he was running, to be honest. So that was like, I saw this name, I'm like, wait a minute, wasn't he the White House physician? So it was a good day for Trump in that respect.
Yeah, all the people Trump endorsed won, and most of them won pretty big. And the power of Trump. Ask Jeff Sessions if he thinks Trump still has power to swing elections, because I think he would conclude that he does, right?
Right.
Because Trump was
and at least Sessions, said we got to work, for Tuberville, right? He didn't,
right.
It wasn't sour grapes and did it.
Yeah, handled it with class, as you kind of knew he would.
Yeah, which is good, because not every politician is like that. So that's good for them on that regard.
There's one down in the Rio Grande Valley, down in like Hidalgo, right down the bottom of Texas, that's to replace Will Hurd.
Oh yeah,
who's retiring, Republican, one of the two black Republicans in the House, and it is there was about, at the last I looked, about 7 votes separating them. So
wow,
yeah, so it's going to be, and of course that's the King Ranch area, and there's a long history of funny things happening in elections down in that part of Texas. So it'll be interesting to see. And this is just a primary, it'll be a tough race there to hold that district, because it's a
Did Trump get involved in that race at all? I mean, he doesn't vote all the time.
No, he didn't get involved in that race, I don't think.
Okay, so maybe he figured it was just going to be too close anyway, that he likes the odds to be better than 50-50.
Right, that's right. Right. And I don't blame him,
Right. Okay, so since we last were together, the big news out of the legal side was Roger Stone having his sentence commuted. He was about to head off to prison. He had, I think he had said either on Twitter or some other, he'd post on it that he thought he was going to get it, and he did get it on, Friday night. His conviction, right? I guess is still there, but the sentence is now been commuted, right? Liberals and some Republicans have howled at this. I mean, what's your take about Roger Stone and all of this? Was this the right decision?
Well, I mean, it should be obvious to any fair-minded person that this was a political persecution, right? That he was what his crime was being a friend of Trump's. The judge was crooked in the case. She issued meaningless or ridiculous, unneeded gag orders. Let a juror, the foreman of the jury was a Democrat activist, former candidate for Congress from Tennessee, who had tweeted that she thought Stone was guilty before she got on the jury. That was allowed to go forward. The judge knew it and let it go. The judge has a lot of answering to do here too. So then, over-sentenced him as stiffly as she could. You're letting, child rapist out of jail because of COVID, but you want to put this guy in because he's a friend of Trump, right? So Trump righted the scales on that. The other thing is, I'm becoming more and more convinced that both parties are looking at internal polling, and Trump is routing Biden in that. Okay, this is a move of a guy who doesn't have to worry about political fallout, right? If Trump was worried about political fallout, he could have done this November 4th, right? I guess he didn't want him to spend any time Stone to spend any time in prison, but he could have avoided a lot of the hate on it by waiting until the day after the election to do it. He didn't do that. It kind of tells you that he has a good feeling that he's in good shape for this election. On the polling side, he's gone up every day this week. He's at 48 this morning on Rasmussen, which is moving into dominant territory at this stage of an election.
Yeah, I mean, with Stone too. I mean, at 67, I mean, going to prison. I mean, with COVID hanging over our heads, he definitely falls into the vulnerable camp. So that there's something to be said for that too. But I thought, you talk about the political fallout and all these kinds of things. So I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal editorial after he had done this, but they gave Trump credit for doing it now, for putting it out now in the open rather than waiting. And then ran through Clinton and Obama and other presidents who have pardoned a lot of other people for some pretty sketchy reasons and things like that.
Trump has commuted 11 sentences now. Obama commuted like 1,700 something. So I mean, it's a non-issue. And every time you say, "Oh, you abused the power of the pardon," every time any president uses that power, the other side says it was abused. It's 100% tendency. Pelosi wants to introduce a bill to curtail the pardon power. It's like, Jonathan Turley said, it's dead on arrival at the courthouse. That's for sure. Even if it were to unlikely chance it passes, it would not survive a court challenge.
Yeah, I think I'd seen something to that effect as well, that it just won't go anywhere legally. Now, what about, one of the things that the Journal said, and a lot of other people have been wondering about in terms of this, is that what does this do for Michael Flynn? Does this push a potential Flynn pardon off the table for a while, because you don't do bam bam? Or if Trump wins re-election, would he do it at that point?
Trump doesn't care about the bam bam. Don't bother him. As for Flynn, I think that they're going to let the process play out. It's like, what is going on with that judge, right? So I still think that part of what his problem is he wants to get to the bottom of how Flynn was prosecuted and how we got to this point from the prosecution's side. And I think that's a worthwhile thing to explore. It appears that the prosecutors withheld Brady information. Almost daily now, information is coming out that prosecutors were supposed to have provided to the defense. We just rewatched My Cousin Vinny with the kids the other night. And at one point in the movie, like he goes and meets with the prosecutor, and he goes, "Yeah, I'd like all that stuff you have about the guy." Oh, he calls the secretary, says, "Give him all the Brady material, basically, right? All his information." And then Marissa Tomei says, he has to give you that. You didn't con him out of anything, Slick. He's required by law to provide you this. And so people don't, you got to think about it. They broke the law. They were supposed to provide this information. It's dribbling and drabbling out after the guy pleaded guilty because he was convinced there was too much evidence to fight. But it turns out they had a lot of evidence that he was not guilty that they didn't give him. So, I have been a hard person to convert on this, because my attitude is, if you plead guilty and you allocute in court to the crime, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for you, coming back and recanting your confession and all that nonsense. But it does appear that the prosecution had it in for him. The judge did not perform up to even minimal legal ethical standards, and his own defense counsel was not very aggressive about seeking out all this stuff, and may have been in on the deal themselves. They may have been in on, get this guy to plead guilty to a process crime and get this off our table, right? And I think Sullivan wants to know what of all that stuff I just said is true. And what can be done about it, because he did the Ted Stevens trial, which was essentially the same thing. Government had to end up backing away from all its evidence because it was improperly obtained. So, I don't think that I'm for him stopping what he's doing. I would like to see let's have this battle over whether he should be able to withdraw his plea and how the evidence was handled and how the prosecution acted, and get that all in the public square, because it also has implications. This was done by the Mueller team, right? These were Mueller's 19 Hillary donating attack dogs. And, so they're waist deep in this, and I want to see where it leads.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up My Cousin Vinny. What a fabulous movie. I mean, how long has it been? About 30 years or so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, 92. Yeah.
92. Okay, so
years.
Marissa Tomei, Fred Gwynn was the judge, right?
Yep.
Yep. I just, for me, it's being the old timer that I am too. It's like I see Herman Munster, and I'm like, oh, great, this is great. What a different role. He was great. I loved him. But anyway, and Marissa Tomei, she was great. I mean, they were.
She won an Oscar for that. Right?
Yeah, it was just a fabulous, one of the funniest movies ever. I think
it really was
a real classic movie. It's kind of funny how you bring that up and throw that out there. I wonder if we should recommend that to Donald Trump.
I already had Father of the Year sewn up before I did that, so it doesn't hurt.
All right, moving on. President Trump and Dr. Fauci. So I mean, what's going on here? I mean, there's a lot of the media says all this stuff about Trump and Fauci and whether or not he's being bottled up by the administration. There are a lot of conservatives who don't like Fauci. There are others that say we ought to pay attention to him. I mean, what's the opinion here? What should be our opinion of Dr. Fauci and Donald Trump and the whole COVID thing? Who's right, wrong about masking and all this kind of stuff?
Well, there's a few things to unpack there. One is, Peter Navarro, who's the trade rep, the White House trade guy, wrote an op-ed in USA Today. It was the opposing view in USA Today, saying, I like him. He's a nice guy, but he's been wrong about everything he said about this, And, you can split hairs over what exactly he was wrong about, but he has, you read Navarro's piece, he's got a pretty good list there of things that, Fauci's been on both sides of the mask question. He's been on both sides of how urgent this was, how much should be shut down, when things should be shut down, what should be the metrics to reopen, right? He's kind of changed his mind as he's gone through this. He's been doing this. This is the fifth president he's served. He's been in this business for almost 50 years. But, he's never seen anything like this. This is the big event in the life of an immunologist, virologist, those kind of people, scientists, and he's also a physician. So, they're in uncharted territory. Things that they have always assumed to be true, they found are not true, right? In the case of this virus. So, he does have some things to explain. He does seem to have caused some setbacks in the recovery from this. I think I put this in the box right now of, Don McGahn was going to be fired for months and months and months and months. And finally he just left on his own. He was never fired, right? Mueller was going to be fired for months and months and months and months, right? Press asking him every day, are you going to fire, Mueller, asking Mueller, do you expect to be fired, right? And just on and on and on. He's going to fire Mueller. He never fired Mueller, right? Because he knew, A, that he was innocent, and that B, Mueller was going to eventually have to say that, right? So, all these things go on, and these people fight, these rumors. Now, this piece by Navarro kind of tells you that, the White House has said, he wrote that on his own. We didn't clear it. We didn't go through our processes at all. So it's sort of like they get a punch, but they don't have to take responsibility for it. So, they are starting to change the terms of debate about Fauci. I do not agree with the conservatives who say that he's out to undermine Trump. I think he was out to get this right. I think he's had a lot of opportunities to undermine Trump and passed on them and refused to take advantage of them. So, my view on this is that he's probably not a bad guy. Now, in Trump world, nothing lasts forever, right? Things typically move pretty quickly. So, he brought in, we were talking about Jeff Sessions earlier. He brought in Barr because Sessions was not moving on the Mueller investigation. It was going to, their intention was to keep dragging it on and dragging it on. Barr was brought in to finish it. Okay. Now Barr is supposed to finish these other things with John Durham. It looks like Barr is having trouble bringing things into the barn now. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see some, urgings in one form or another from the White House to him to get going. The latest update is, the media is saying, it's not verified by anybody in the office, that, the Durham investigation may be punted till after the election, which, I'm sorry, but it's useless after the election. Win, lose, or draw in the election. I don't care about that stuff after November, right? It's not, who cares what Obama did 5 years ago? Either way, Trump wins or loses, right? Yeah. But it's like, right, and at the time, people need to weigh that into their choice now, right? You say, well, shouldn't be political, but I mean, it's been 4 years. Like, that election was 2016, right? The crimes that are getting described have already passed their 4th anniversary, right? So, it's time for them to produce. We can't indict someone within 4 years of them committing their crime. That's its own problem. That's our, we got to keep looking at this and that. We stretched it. We're now looking at these other guys, and Flynn is part of the holdup, right? It's like, well, we also want to throw in the misconduct of Flynn. The misconduct of Flynn is not material to these guys. It's only tangentially material to these guys trying to overthrow a president and not allow him to take office and not participate in the peaceful transfer of power that every previous president had done.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you on the whole Fauci thing, because I've never really seen him. He doesn't have a political agenda per se. He is trying to figure out how to get this right. As you said, who has really seen anything like this? This is hitting all of us, out of left field. All these doctors, the immunologists, the epidemiologists, all these people, virologists, they're trying to figure out and trying to find the thing that will help us kind of corral this thing and find a cure, find a vaccine that will reduce, the infections and the death rates and things like that. So they're there in the public interest. So yeah, we're going to see conflicting information. We're going to see opinions change as the situation changes. They learn more. Right.
I'll tell you that, like, one of the things, the demarcation on information is the theorists v. the practitioners, right? The virologists, epidemiologists, the Fauci people of the world have, in several instances, said different things than the people who are on the, actually out treating patients. Like one of, good example is hydroxychloroquine, right? So, the people actually treating patients are like, wow, I gave him this with the zinc pack and the whole thing. It's like $15 a treatment, and my patients got better. So I kept using it because my patients kept getting better, And then, Fauci's like, well, that hasn't gone through the 3-part FDA testing process to be approved as a treatment for COVID. Right. And I'm like, well, if it's working, if the people doing it, are getting success, then, why would you withhold that? When what he's saying, people think, well, he's poo-pooing the idea, right? What he's saying is we have a process. And before the FDA, the government says, you can use this drug to treat this disease, we need to test this drug treating this disease. We need to actually test it as opposed to just using it, and moving on. So I think that, he has displayed a level of caution that people in his position display. That's how they do what they do. We want that slow, deliberate, patient, thorough testing process 99.9% of the time. This is one of the rare occasions when it needs to move faster, right? But for the most part, we support slow. We support, taking your time and getting this stuff right. We don't want to take quack drugs that don't cure what we think they will cure and have whatever effects on our bodies otherwise, right? We want all this stuff nailed down before we start taking it. So, he's more careful than Trump. Trump is an optimist, and Trump, he got onto the hydroxychloroquine and he started, preaching it. And so, Trump has, $4 worth of stock in the company. So it's a big ripoff, and then, it comes to find out that, the whole dose with the zinc and the zinc pack and all that Z pack and all that stuff is $15, right? Which is like the other Resmure or whatever it's called is $1,100. So, we're going to treat all these people, then, the $15 option really matters, right? We could go broke treating them with more expensive treatments.
As long as they don't buy the fish food or whatever that was.
Right. Fish
right?
tank. That's the other thing is like, first of all, that's the only one of those. The guy who ate the fish tank cleaner is the only one of those it's ever been documented, right? The people say, Trump said to put acid in your body or whatever it was to clean it out, put lights down your body, or was it antiseptic or something?
Yeah.
I don't remember what he said, but it's like, who did that? Who actually drank Lysol? Show me the guy who's in the hospital for drinking Lysol based on Trump's recommendation. You show me that, and I will show you a Democrat voter.
Right, and you're
right.
Yeah, right.
And Republicans are done that. It's been Democrat. If it's been done at all, it's Democrats.
Right, and we have the FDA. I mean, yeah, sometimes you can complain about the slow process, but like you said, we don't want crack medicines out there. When you watch a commercial for these medications out there, I mean, look at the long, long list of potential side effects.
Yeah, by the time they're done, I'm like, I'm not touching that.
Exactly right. You're like, why would I take that?
The disease is better,
Yeah. So, I mean, but, they look at it saying that, the tests show that it's very effective for a group of the population. But, we want you to know that if you have these conditions, it's possible it won't work. You might have certain side effects. And I've known people, they're on medications and they say, yeah, there are side effects, but we think that it's worth it for the side effects. We can live with some of those side effects, and everybody's body is different, right? We react differently. So it's not, hydroxychloroquine, it's not a be all end all for everybody, but if it helps somebody and it's cheap, why not let it go? Right.
That's right.
All right. So I want to ask you just really quickly. So, Trump wore a mask when he went to visit at Walter Reed, and that became a big deal about it. I mean, do you think that we're going to see Trump wearing a mask more often, or is he just going to limit it to places, things like that?
I think limit it to a place like that. I think he didn't even want that picture to get out. He did that for the soldiers.
Yeah.
The mask, it's like, it's become a symbol of, nanny statism, making you the whole question of like how the power has been used, the political power has been used as this. Have they gone too far? Are they just doing things for political gain? The science of the mask, for one thing, they're telling you that, the micron of COVID is 1/3 the size of the holes in the mask. So it gets in easily, right? So, I mean, I was wearing a mask all the time before I got it. Right? I've worn a mask less since I had it than before. Okay. So, then, things are caught in the mask. There's all, but there's this, vituperation. You must wear a mask or you're damaging my life and you're going to kill me. And, and it's like, I don't know. So, we got to think about what it means to be an American and, what it means to keep people safe, right? Because I don't want to endanger people. You don't want to endanger people.
Right.
But that's really become kind of a flashpoint in this sort of, force people to knuckle under type of attitude that has been associated with it. And I think if you did it, like if you treated it like we treated smoking, littering, littering, we passed laws against littering. We didn't even pass laws against smoking. We just made it, more expensive and a little older you have to buy them or whatever. But, how did we really reduce smoking, right? It wasn't the price. It wasn't even the law saying you had to be 18 or whatever. It was a, public information campaign, right? Public persuasion. We said, hey, smoking's bad for you. Here's all the things it does to you. You don't really want this to happen to you. And, people quit smoking. We about, in the 60s, like 35% of adults smoked. Now it's like 4%, 3%. And, the same thing with littering. Littering is 1/20th of the problem it was in the 60s, right? Because they just said, hey, who's supposed to clean up this mess? It's you, right? So, you're either going to spend a lot of money cleaning it up, or you start learning to put stuff in the trash yourself, right? And so it wasn't us screaming at each other. It was us saying, here's the advantages of doing this right, okay? And, I think it's time to think about, with the mask issue, to think about public persuasion as opposed to, standing on your soapbox and screaming at people and, confronting people in the grocery store and all that kind of stuff.
Right. So, there's the Journal had another interesting editorial today. This was a good one because, we're seeing some of the states like California started to close some of the businesses down again. It was happening in parts of Florida and Texas and things like that. A lot of the reopenings have been put on pause and whatnot. And a lot of the blame has been going to the people congregating in bars, congregating at beaches and whatnot. But what I thought was, the Journal threw out these statistics that I thought were really interesting, which is that up in San Francisco, in the Santa Clara area as well, those were areas that had actually really not opened. They had done, and so they had kept them under control. But they are actually seeing spikes right now of like 230% or whatever. And so as a Journal, as they kind of ran down a list of the different parts of the country where there have been these big spikes, they just they selected Southern California, they looked at Miami, Texas, and things like that. They said one of the things is that the government is trying to control our behavior. The state and federal government's controlling our behavior. But while it has worked to a certain degree, obviously in the San Francisco area and things like that, where they have limited, activity, it didn't really work because the things are spiking, right?
I mean, New York was extremely shut down when it had its big spike.
Right.
And now it appears the spike in Florida may have been a reporting problem as opposed to people getting sick. It looks like, there was something like 22 out of 20 or 32 out of the 35 clinics that were doing COVID testing were reporting 100% positive. Everyone who took a test was positive, right? Then you would go back and ask them, and it's like there was a VA hospital that was said 86% were, or 96% were COVID positive, and they said they looked at their test results again and said 4% were, right? So, what happened is they didn't report negatives. They just reported positives.
Right.
10 people take the test and 2 of them are positive, and you only turn in, hey, we had 2 positive results. You get a skewed number, right? So now it looks like the estimate of cases in Florida is at least 10 times higher than it was supposed to be. And so there's been calls this morning for Governor Abbott in Texas to see what's going on with them. It was like, how did they have this spike? And they still have a lot of people saying they don't know anybody. I see on the internet every day, I don't know anybody who has had COVID. I know 0 people who have ever had this disease. How about you? And I'm like, well, I haven't, but so it's not like this penetration of, it's everywhere and everybody has it and everything's a case, it's that model is taking on some heat because, they can't prove it.
Yeah, and the Journal kind of in conclusion with this is that, they're basically saying like, look, we're, the government tends to think that they're, these people think they're kind of going to eradicate this. And this is not going to happen. We're going to be living with this for quite a while. And it's personal responsibility. It's our behavior that the government really can't control. I mean, when we're at home at this point in time, they can't really control us having people over to our house or having an outdoor party. Or like the guy in Texas, he went to a COVID party and he wound up catching it and dying from it and things like that. But, that's going to happen. We had some people over our house on Sunday because they're moving to Texas, and they walked in the house. The parents walked in the house. And they're in their 30s wearing masks. We weren't wearing masks, and we're like, "Do you want us to wear masks?" But they took their mask off, and we were sat across the table. We had discussions. The kids played with my wife, and stuff like that. They took a selfie together with the kids. I think, in controlled small areas, I mean, if you are trying to be careful and watch out for what you're doing and your behavior, I think it's fine. But there are people who have been irresponsible that have helped this, but also the reporting functions. There are problems with them everywhere you go. And so, and then the reporting that comes out, even so, the media reporting is kind of like, they're looking for, oh, look, it's the positivity rate is 22%. It's, Florida's had 13,000 cases. It's a record and stuff like that. It's like, we're like the worst in the world. And it's like, you're taking things out of context.
Right. No one knows an account or how anything works. And now it looks like the problem is about 1/10 as big as was previously said.
All right, I want to get onto this before we run out of time, because I want to get your opinion about it, because we talked about this just briefly before the show began, which is the New York Times opinion writer, Bari Weiss, resigned yesterday in a scathing, scorching. She torched the paper for what had happened. She'd been there for 3 years, and she talked about in her letter about how she was excited about kind of going to work there, that voices like hers and others, which had not been part of the normal process of the opinion page of the New York Times, is now getting a chance to be heard, working with a lot of other people, and working with James Bennett, the editorial page editor at the time, and all of this stuff. But she turned around and she says, I have to leave, in essence, because of the culture there. People called me a racist and a Nazi. They complained when I wrote about the Jewish situation and things like that. So just kind of a litany of things. But you've been a writer for a long time. And you've been an observer for a long time. I mean, what's your take on Bari Weiss and what happened there?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is, she said Twitter is the editor of the New York Times editorial page. Like, they react to what they saw on Twitter. One of the things that I've stumbled across a couple of pieces lately about the essence of which is people think that they are dominating the news cycle by being on Twitter, right? Everybody sees my stuff and knows me because of Twitter. And it turns out that Twitter does not have that big an influence on what's going on out in the rest of the country, right? They try to pass it off that they do, but it doesn't appear to be that big a part of the mix. The other point is, one of the things she said in there was, they have Slack, which, it's like intra-company email, right? Or it's not even sort of a text.
Well, it's a project, basically. We used it at AIM, but it didn't work very well when they kept trying to do it.
Yeah. So, and she was brutally harassed over Slack. And, whole conversations went on about how bad she was, that no one, nobody from management stepped up and said, that's not what we use Slack for. That's not how we treat coworkers. She's here because she disagrees with you, right? We want her to put forth her views strongly. And, your opinion of it is not important to us, right? So what's going on, one of the things that's going on in the New York Times is the inmates are running the asylum. How did that not get stopped? How did Dean Baquet or James Bennett or whoever not step in and say, hey, look, whatever you think of her, we don't mistreat coworkers here. We run a clean shop. And they didn't do that, right? So you have a big black eye on your company now because, you didn't force totally normal, totally regular, employee policy.
Yeah, I mean, if this didn't expose just the complete craziness and liberal bent of the New York Times, I don't know what else would ever do this, because it was, she just laid it bare for people to look at this.
Yeah, hateful, petty, mean people.
Right. Look, Andrew Yang even tweeted yesterday, it was like, that, if Bari Weiss can't, have a job, can't be over there, then there's a real problem at the New York Times. It's interesting to see that kind of reaction. Now Weiss was also, she also took a lot of heat too, This comes really just about a week or less than a week after, or thereabouts, after she had been one of the signatories of that letter that appeared in Harper's, where all these people, Noam Chomsky, J.K. Rowling, and and a whole, Matthew Iglesias, they all signed off on this letter, criticizing the left for their cancel culture and all the stuff that's been going on. So she had signed on to that letter. So, and I'm sure that also sped up this whole process. I'm sure she got really raked over the coals privately as well as in public for that.
Yeah, and there were also people out there saying, why does she get harassed and not Ross Douthat and not Brett Stevens, right? And how anti-Semitic is the New York Times now? There's a couple of questions that deserve an answer. And what is going on with the left and anti-Semitism? I mean, it seems to be, I half expect to see it in their platform, in the Democrat platform.
Right. Well, I mean, and she also mentioned that Tom Cotton op-ed that got they took a lot of flack for, where James Bennett in the end apologized for it. They attached a long editorial note to that afterwards. He eventually resigned, and then his deputy was reassigned. And she said, it took them 2 days to figure this out. And she complained, whereas other people who were, I think she mentioned someone who had written an anti-Semitic piece, just passed, right?
Yeah.
So it's just, the New York Times is,
it's lost its way. It needs to get a whip cracker in there and show who's boss. If people don't want to be there, one of the things that we have found out is, and it's really kind of hurt the New York Times and the Washington Post and so forth. There are a lot of talented journalists out there who don't work there and don't want to work there, and so they're off, the internet has given us all a platform to say what we want to say and to cover what we want to cover. And, the best journalists are not ending up at the best papers anymore, right? Washington Post, those are, you got some high school level people covering the White House there. They can't source. They don't know what the facts are. They don't know how things work anymore. The Times is the same. And now you have, just like schoolyard taunts going on among the editorial writers.
Yeah, it's gotten pretty bad. All right, final topic before we go to 2 minutes. I want your thoughts on Joe Biden and his $2 trillion climate plan.
I thought the timing of that was crazy. It's like, who's talking about climate plan right now? It's one of the mildest years. It's going to be hard. We used to laugh about, at the end of the year, every night, every December 31st, one of the news anchors in Washington was bound to call it the hottest year on record, right? No matter what, whether it was or not. But it's going to be hard to do this year. The coldest spring in 37 years, pretty mild summer. The winter was not that cold, so I guess that'll bump it up a little bit. But I mean, it's just not, there's no energy behind that. It's no, in there, the other things have failed. That's sort of like, can't go Russia anymore. We spent $40 million and that came up empty. Can't go Ukraine anymore. It's beginning to look to the American people. You look at the polling that, they don't see a whole lot wrong with Trump's response to COVID, right? It's like, okay, what will we have done different? Don't really know, So, I think the more this goes on, the more that it's going to be that way.
Yeah, and it's not the kind of message that I think really wins you a lot of voters at this point in time.
No.
Because of the pandemic, people's priorities have changed a lot, and climate change is really not at the top of this. And Biden, one of the things that gets me about this, or maybe a couple of things, is just that how he's going to pay for this. So he wants to increase the corporate tax rate from 21 to 20%, raise the top tax rate back up to close to 40% for top earners. And then other money is going to come from stimulus money. And I'm like, wait a minute. So more of our taxpayer money, and a lot of it probably will come from that. But you're going to choke off the corporations. You raise the taxes. What happens to businesses?
That's how we got the economic growth, right? As we lowered the corporate tax, lowered depreciation from 5 years to 1, encouraged a huge torrent of business spending and hiring and building. And, it's also how we will get out of this, economic decline we're in now, COVID caused economic decline we're in now, because businesses are aching to spend, right, under these conditions, and to reinvest and get back going again. And whereas, at this point, they're talking about, oh, let's go back to the old policies and give a bunch of money, rejoin the Paris Accords. We're the only country, by the way, in the world meeting its Paris emissions reduction goals. We're the only ones. We're not even in it. We're meeting our goals. No one else is. So it's just hard to understand, what he's thinking there. I guess they're trying to make news any way they can. You have a candidate, you can't really put him out in front of the public. Has to stay holed up in the basement. He can't really, his campaign events are disasters. He can't answer questions, form a sentence. I guess this is all, you're trying to make it policy. The other thing is, what they are doing is marrying his policy package to Bernie's, right? And,
right.
My understanding was the reason that they, conspired, and there's no other word for it, to give him the nomination before Super Tuesday, made all those people drop out and everything, was because the internal polling showed that Bernie would get them wiped out of the House, the Senate, and the White House. So now, they appoint Biden, who there's very little enthusiasm for, and I think even they recognize that, would admit that, and this guy who can't help you, right? So I don't know.
Right. You've commented, but I'll give you that final comment, 2 minutes.
Final comment, 2 minutes. Okay, a couple of things to cover here real quick. Schools talking about reopening. Looks like in Fairfax, it's going to be 2 or 3 days a week you go in, and other than that, distance learning. Other places are saying all distance learning. University of California system is shut down until 2021. One of the big things about all these colleges shutting down is, that's where a lot of Democrat votes come from, right? The activism on campus, and, it's like all the Democrats go walk down and vote together and so forth. And, but that's not going to happen this year. And, I read a piece the other day that could cost the Democrats about 5 million votes across the country, that people aren't going to school. So, they kind of have interest. They want to win the election of getting schools to a point where they'd be back open. And then, and considering that you cannot get COVID from a child, there's really no sound argument against it.
All right, that's good. That's interesting too about the votes. I hadn't thought about that, but that's very true in terms of we'll have to wait and see how that all turns out. I'm just going to say, Redskins name change. I'm sorry, as I said on Facebook, they're always going to be the Redskins to me. That's how I grew up. I don't care what they change it to. I mean, we may have the Washington Wizards, but I'm the Bullets guy. So, it's these things. I mean, even my high school mascot we were the Indians. The school closed down when they reopened. But by that time, the PC cancel culture had taken hold, so they're the Gladiators. Those things I'm not going to give up. I don't care what people say. I'm old. I don't really care. Just, stick it to me if you can. But I think a lot of people are probably feeling the same way. It's like, I don't care what you change it to at this point because it's a given, but we're still always going to be Redskin fans or Redskin acolytes or whatever. So be it.
Well, as a Cowboys fan, any chaos with that franchise is good for me.
Look, Daniel Snyder is chaos. Okay.
That's He's my favorite owner.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much once again for joining us. As always, stay safe, stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. God bless America. We will see you again next week. Live stream stop.